but you've got to win the odd game. Again, we look at them stats. Again, if you're a player in that dressing room, and them stats, obviously, they'll be thrown at you week in, week out. I just think, what must the players be thinking? What must be the vibe be in the dressing room? They must be, I go back, they must be embarrassed by it. But obviously, they've got that get-out-of-jail card.
Can you imagine being in a Manchester United dressing room where defeat was acceptable? Which it has felt like that has been the case in some recent weeks.
I make the point about competing, and people always talk about my time in the dressing room, but I was in other dressing rooms. I was in Nottingham Forest. I was in an Irish dressing room for years. I was a Celtic. I played for other teams. But what you want in your dressing room is a group of players. They're going to go back to good habits. You can't win every week. But what I don't get over the last month or two, when I've seen them up in Newcastle, is the lack of fight. They're not competing. You can forgive players having a bad time. You can forgive teams for losing. Of course, that's the name of the game.
Hey. We'll get back to Roy in just a quick second, but remember, if you like this video, please like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to click the notification button so that you know when the next Big D video hits. And as ever, if something is on your mind, if something is bubbling up inside of you, you know how this works. Stick it in the comments. The Big D reads all of the comments, and he's always interested in what is on your mind. So in this clip, Roy Keane is going to be giving his brutally honest opinion, as per usual, about Manchester United. This was right before the Chelsea game on Friday evening, which Manchester United were going on lose. Spoiler alert. But anyway, stick around for after the clip, because the Big D is going to be giving his thoughts on Roy Keane and why Roy Keane is not as right as he thinks he is. Anyway, here's Roy.
Do you think, Roy, if this United team that's starting here tonight was playing every week, that they would be in the same position?
Well, I don't know. That's obviously Garnacho. You think he might come in for the final next week, but obviously it's not on this manager's watch. They've lost 17 league games. They lost 14 league games last year, so it's not a difficult few months they're having where you go into European competition, the injuries. This has been going on for since last season. So this group, they don't know how to compete week in, week out. So you can sit here and go, well, if they had all their best players available, but injuries and suspensions is part of the demands of being a top footballer. This is the bit that I don't get. I think when you're playing for the big clubs, there's a reason why you're playing for a big club. Obviously, you think you're good enough, but that you turn up week in, week out. That's the sign of a great player to me, greatness. And I look at these players, and it's every week they don't know how to compete. The demands of playing for Man United. And again, to lose that many games this year, you could write this off and go, OK, listen, it happened. But it's on the back of 14 league game defeats last season. So they've got into extremely bad habits. And I think the manager, he's a very likeable guy, he's very honest, and he seems to be the biggest critic. But I think his head must be spinning. I reckon he can't wait to get to the summer. Obviously, fingers crossed they get into Europe.
Of course, he didn't want to start until the summer.
No, and you could see why. He was probably thinking, listen, I don't want to go into that mess just yet. Yeah, he probably looked at it, but obviously United said, we want you now. And obviously it's going to be a big summer coming up, but we've said that the last few summers. We say that for most clubs. Recruitment is key, getting the right players in, the right characters, and getting lads out. But I think he'll obviously be glad to see the back of this season. I think, listen, his head must be spinning from day one. When you look at his first game at Ipswich, they drew, and they could have lost that game. And I bet he's thinking, what is going on here? I've come into Man United. Maybe he was expecting a lot more from these players. And he's mentioned during the week as well the players training and bad habits and the messages coming out about this group of players.
He was angry last week.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good message. And I'm going back to the last month or two where some of the games they've just written off. They've said, no, but we're focused on next week. I've never heard so much chat from a club about next week's game. Again, what about the game today? It'll be interesting how they turn up tonight. They've got a final next week. You'd like to think there might be one or two places up for grabs, or you want some momentum to go into the final, whether you get momentum from one game, I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see their mentality tonight in terms of compete with Chelsea, who Chelsea have a lot to play for tonight more than United in terms of league.
They are creating unwanted records this season. They've already managed a couple, and there's a couple more within their grasp. The fewest wins, points and most defeats. They will all be set this season. They are 7 behind the fewest goals they've ever scored, and 5 from also making it the worst defensively season. And if they don't win either this week or next at home to Aston Villa, it will be, if they don't win tonight, it'll be their most without a win as well. There'll be scars, Jamie, from those records. But do you think a summer of overhaul, he changed 12 players in his first summer at Sporting Lisbon. Is it going to take that sort of number again to get this football club back on the right track?
But that's not going to happen in one window. because you can't just, in a day and age, you can't say, look, you can leave now, because players want paying up with their contracts. There's going to a lot that's going to go into that.
Does that have to be almost a policy?
Possibly,
even if it does cost them.
But it's going to take time. And I think what they've done in the past is they've just gone for the quick fix. Maybe, OK, there's a couple of players there, they'll do us, they'll fix it, we'll plug a few gaps, and then all of a sudden we're going to be fine. It doesn't work like that. You need to make sure you've got to bring in the right players, the right people that are going to change the culture. Roy said it there. When he talks about in training, the training's not been good or things aren't right on the training field, you have no chance. People have to set good examples every day. The senior players have to set the right examples. So something has to change in that respect. But I do think, I don't know, I like him. I think he talks. Sometimes his honesty gets in his own way because he just wants it so badly. You can see that. But there is something about him that I like. I think he will get it right, and they have an opportunity to still get Champions League football even after this disastrous season. So they can make it end up being an OK season. Never going to be good enough for Manchester United. You should never lose 17 games in a season at a club of that enormity. But this is going to take a lot of time. And they need to... You can't also keep just sacking managers. I never once believed in Eric Ten Hag was the man that was really going to take the club forward. But for whatever reason, I look at him and I think, yeah, he has something about him.
At some point, Roy, he's going to have to win games, isn't he?
Yeah, you got to win the odd game. That does help. And when you're moving players on from Sporting Lisbon, I'm pretty sure they want on 200 or 300 grand a week.
Exactly, yeah.
That's the challenge for him as well. If he's trying to move the big hitters on, they'll just be sitting there, and rightly so, they're under contract. But you've got to win the odd game. Again, we look at them stats. Again, if you're a player in that dressing room, and them stats, obviously, they'll be thrown at you week in, week out. I just think, what must the players be thinking? What must be the vibe in the dressing room? They must be, I go back, they must be embarrassed by it. But obviously they've got that get out of jail card.
Can you imagine being in a Manchester United dressing room where defeat was acceptable? Which it has felt like that has been the case in some of these recent weeks.
I make the point about competing, and people always talk about my time in the dressing room, but I was in other dressing rooms. I was in Nottingham Forest. I was in an Irish dressing room for years. I was in Celtic. I played for other teams. But what you want in your dressing room is a group of players. They're going to go back to good habits. You can't win every week. But what I don't get over the last month or two, when I've seen them up in Newcastle, is the lack of fight. They're not competing. You can forgive players having a bad time. You can forgive teams for losing. Of course, that's the name of the game. But my goodness, when you have the manager coming up, most weeks saying, again, the manager scratching his head, and he's working with him closely. Again, I go back to it. I reckon when he came from Lisbon, and he said that basically in his first week when he done the Ipswich match, saying he's never done so many media interviews. I think his head's spinning from the demands of being a Man United manager. And I reckon he's looking at these group of players, and I know he's been positive a little bit there about looking forward to next season, but not with this team. Don't think for 1 minute this team's going to be top 4, top 5. Not with the habits they've got. They've got some quality. We see Bruno there, but forget about United competing.
So it's culture. It's culture.
Well, it has to be part of it, of course.
So how long does it take then to change that culture, and how long?
And better players.
And how long can a manager go without winning games? It's 3 wins in 24 matches that he's had against teams that are going to be in the Premier League next season.
Yeah, that tells you, no matter what the cult you go to, like, you need better players. You need 1 or 2. I like Bruno. I think he's a player that you can build the team around. I mean, Mason Mount has been ravaged with injuries. Is he the player that's going to make a difference in this squad? Maybe you're certainly going to give him next year, that's for sure.
But Jamie,
there's others you already know that
full
aren't good
season.
enough.
He gets the full season.
Yeah, but gets the full season. But there's others you know they're not going to be good
But I
enough.
ask you, when you talk about the culture, and it rolls off our tongue here, the culture, what are the senior players doing? That's why I point the finger at Bruno and these other players, not their talent.
Doesn't the culture actually start higher than that, Roy?
No, I think it comes from the senior players. Oh, listen, I sound like Graham
The leadership.
Souness. Yeah, it comes from that. Yeah, but the group, the dressing room senior players run the show. That's what you do. That's why they're so important. That's why people say you need good senior players who've got good habits. We've spoken about players at other clubs over the years, people like Gerrard or Lampard here, great quality, but they drive the quality in training, how you prepare for training. You don't let people off the hook. When the manager's coming out, like you said earlier, going, oh, I'm not getting good vibes in the training, you're like, well, what is going on at the training ground? Because you have to train how you play. Don't think for 1 minute you can take it easy on a Monday to Friday and turn up on a Saturday and expect to perform at this level. It doesn't happen. The odd player can do it. People like Messi and Ronaldo can maybe do it the odd time, but the top teams turn up every day and train properly. And that is driven, it's not driven by the younger players, trust me, because they're learning their trade. It's driven by the senior players.
And the standards, yeah.
The standards in trade, of course.
1 or 2 of those senior players, as you've seen, are back in the starting lineup.
Yeah, so Roy Keane, I seem to say this week in, week out about Roy Keane. He's a player, and most footballers are like this, and it's because they've got the footballer's mindset. You know, the player's mindset is they can't see the woods for the trees. You know, it's all well and good. Oh, what about the senior players? Blah, blah, blah. You know, why aren't they stepping up? Man United don't really have senior players. I mean, because when he's talking about senior players, you know, he's talking about Bruce, Pallister. He's talking about like Stam and Van der Sar and all these great Schmeichel and himself and Giggs and all of this. Man United don't have players like that anymore at this point. Plus, it's a different age. Because a lot of the senior players from sort of Roy Keane's era, you know, they were at the clubs for years. They were stalwarts, you know. I mean, there have been a couple of players at United who have been there, you know, like in the current squad, who have been there a while. But footballers these days are mercenaries, you know. So if the club isn't going in the right direction, it's almost like they switch off. And I'm not saying that that's right or that that's wrong, and I understand Roy Keane's frustration, but the game's different today. And it's funny because the one so-called senior player that Man United do have, who is putting the effort in, week out, he's absolutely slated him for the past few weeks, and that's Bruno Fernandes. So, I don't know. Roy Keane seems to have a lack of self-awareness sometimes, and he talks about, you know, it's the senior players, you know, that set the standard, that you know, set the culture at Manchester United. No, it's not. It's not. It's the footballing project. It's the people above the senior players, like a Matt Busby, like an Alex Ferguson, who set the culture. Because it's the managers, or shall I say, the people that set the footballing project in place, are the ones that buy the players. The senior players that put them into place, that instill that culture into them for them to filter it down into the club. Like, you know, you go back to, say, you know, between 99 and 2003, who were the senior players there? Roy Keane, signed by Alex Ferguson. Ryan Giggs, who was trained by Alex Ferguson, who broke through under Alex Ferguson. Same with Scholes, same with Neville, same with Beckham. Van Nistelrooy was bought by Alex Ferguson. That whole team was bought, trained, and drilled and indoctrinated into the winning mindset by Alex Ferguson. You go back to the 50s and 60s, it was the same with Matt Busby. Man United haven't had that since 2013. And Roy Keane doesn't understand that, it seems. However, now that Ineos are there, then perhaps they'll be able to instill a footballing project that thinks medium to long term. But, as I say, Roy Keane and Jamie Redknapp and most football pundits, they don't understand the medium to long term concept. They're just match to match. And I get that. So I can understand, to be fair, Roy Keane thinking, why can't they turn up week in, week out? But there's not many Roy Keanes out there, and there never has been many Roy Keanes. I can maybe think about 5 players that I've ever seen who are like Roy Keane, and this is since I've been watching football. You can maybe say Gerrard, Robson, Keane himself. I don't know, Gattuso. You know, there's not many, so it's. I don't know. They take themselves for granted sometimes, some of these footballers. But hey ho, but you know, this business about 12 or 13 players need to be brought in, and you know, they won't be able to do it in one transfer window, etc. I think they will. It's not that bad at Man United, to be fair. It really isn't. The league is terrible, and the league position and the league form would suggest that I'm talking nonsense. But not really. It's just because, you know, United have given up the ghost since then. But a team that reaches the Europa League final with ease and remains the only undefeated team in all European competitions this season, Man United, things aren't that bad when they are able to achieve that. It's just a little bit of a teething issue at the moment. And this team does not need 12 or 13 new players. And what they do need can be brought in one transfer window. I did a video on this last week or the week before. They only need 3 players for Man United to drastically improve next season. 3. They've got to be the 3 right signings, of course. They need to perform straight away, but it can be done. And they won't be as expensive as you might think. 200 million would do it. And given who's going out the door, given what funds will be available, I think it's fair to say that Man United will have 200 million to spend in the summer. Because the game is it's more of a tactical game these days. It's more of a moneyball concept. It's more of a system and a philosophy style of thinking football these days, for better or for worse. So you don't necessarily need superstars in every position. You just need the right profile of player to slot in. And you can get the right profile of player to slot in so long as they've been, well vetted, well scouted and whatnot. So if United were able to buy Osimhen in the summer, if they were able to buy Cunha in the summer, and they were able to buy, say, Diogo Costa, all of whom would be able to come in for under £200 million all in. And obviously if they performed, which why wouldn't they, then there's no reason why Man United can secure a top 4 finish next season. And have a pretty decent run in the Champions League. So things aren't always as bad as what these pundits would seem. And it said, and on the previous Sean Dyche video that I did, the media get people all stirred up and all whirled up, and they get all the fans all wound up. I'm telling you now, people like Roy Keane got David De Gea sold. They affected Harry Maguire's confidence, and probably got Ole Gunnar Solskjaer sacked. I'm not necessarily saying specifically Roy Keane got Ole Gunnar Solskjaer sacked, but the media got Ole Gunnar Solskjaer sacked. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer should really be still Man United's manager, because look back at his record. It was brilliant. Anyway, I digress. But point being, things aren't always as bad as what they would seem, especially when you're under the Man United microscope. But what do you guys think? Is things as bad as what Roy Keane makes out? Can Man United finish 4th next season? And how do you think they will fare against Tottenham Hotspur in the Europa League final on Wednesday? Thoughts in the comments. And Big D will see you in the next one.